Hey guys, welcome into the Shadow Box. I'm Carlise, your host, your grief and trauma coach, and your shadow work guide. Today with us we have Annie Imprima. She is coming to us from Las Vegas. And Annie is a metaphysical trauma researcher. She is also the creator of Imprima Method, which is for trauma healing and spiritual acceleration. And she'll explain that to us in just a moment. She's also an author, and she has authored The Trauma Whispers Before It Roars. That's interesting. I want to hear about that, Annie. So, Annie, give us a little bit more of a background on you and what kind of brought you into this world of metaphysical work.
I, it was not something I signed up for. As a little kid, I didn't say, when I grow up, I want to do this work. It's a byproduct of surviving adulthood with a lot of military experiences leading up to a deployment. And then during the deployment, um, as I'm like in, as I'm taking in PTSD, I'm also taking in this grand spiritual awakening. And I didn't have an instruction manual. I didn't have any warning. Just 4 days into arriving in Kuwait, my senses just opened up. And it wasn't something I was prepared for. It wasn't something I wished for. It's just something that happened. And so as I'm processing uh, leadership unit issues that will later get diagnosed as PTSD, I'm also hearing voices, seeing things, feeling hands on my shoulder, turning my shoulders. Um, People would higher ranking individuals would ask me questions and the voice in my head would answer it like, they're lying to you, they're lying, that's not right. And so, in 2016, what I'm doing today was not it wasn't on the list of career options.
Okay.
It's just something that evolved through understanding my own physical, emotional, and spiritual journey, and then finding ways to be able to take those trauma stones that I've acquired and build something useful with it.
Okay. Now, Annie, you mentioned a lot about the military. What was your role that you played in the military?
The first half of my Army career was military police.
Okay.
The second half was field finance. So we use, from my perspective in the brigade level, we saw money as a commodity, not a currency. So we
Okay.
were moving, let's say, $20 million on the battlefield. How do we get that money where it needs to go without that money disappearing between point A and point B? So during my deployment, I was flying into many different countries. It's like my little hat up there: Qatar, Jordan, Iraq, and Kuwait, because we would move money and then I would go fly out to go trace that money to make sure it
Okay.
arrived, and then we would recount it upon arrival at the finance location, its destination. So uh, it wasn't mill pay, which is a military term for those that work in the finance offices. We weren't doing traditional finance transactions. We were treating money as a commodity, taking
Mhm.
bricks and walls of money and moving them on the battlefield.
Now that had to be dangerous. And just imagining, being out on the field and everyone's fighting or war or whatever is going on, or just being in that environment itself, um, that's a pretty sketchy world to be in. Now, to add the extra layer to it, you are moving money, and money is money will make people do all kind of things, right? So you were, what was your title in the military?
Finance chief. I was an E6 finance chief. So I was a section chief for a brigade special operations unit, which was logistics. So everything we were doing was about commodities.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for your service before we even keep going. Thank you so much. All right. So we are moving money and we are dealing with all sorts of personalities. We're dealing with people who are lying. You're having to discern, what's really going on around you. Making sure at the same time that you guys aren't being followed or you're not going to be blown up, like all the things, right?
Those
Um,
that part was the least of my worries. And I
yeah.
actually opened my book the very first, the intro of my book, Trauma Whispers Before It Roars, is a scene on a C-130 where we're getting shot at. But I wasn't moving money at the time. Money had been moved separately. I was going to go trace it, and then coming out of El Asad Marine Base, we got shot at.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Let's talk
the
about
enemy was
trauma
not the
then.
problem.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, with all of that was going on, tell us what does trauma mean to you, and how do you define trauma?
I use Valerie Rain. Valerie Rain wrote a book called Patriarchy Stress Disorder,
Okay.
and I use her definition, and it's any experience that made you feel unsafe in your fullest authentic expression and caused you to develop trauma adaptations to keep you safe.
Mm,
And I
okay.
think that really summarizes trauma. It's because before I deployed, before I had PTSD, trauma to me was the extreme. It was the 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 shell shocked combat vet that couldn't function and was not able to work. So to me, even being in the military, even doing yellow ribbon reintegration program training, I still saw trauma as something so evident. And
Okay.
then in my research, I really had to pull back and be aware that trauma is a full spectrum. We can
Hmm.
have a little bit of trauma, we can have chronic trauma, we can have inherited trauma, and it's just like anything else, it is a spectrum, not an on-off switch.
Got it. Got it. Do you think that the word trauma is overused or misused nowadays?
Oh, for sure. I think there's a book called Coddling of the American Mind,
Okay.
which talks about how we've confused trauma with discomfort.
Mhm.
The everyday evolution of our developmental stages, because it's uncomfortable, we develop anxiety, and we're pushing against the natural resilience that is supposed to occur through the stages of development. And because we're so discomfort adverse, everything becomes trauma.
Yeah.
And that wasn't meant to be. Trauma should be something that your system isn't designed to handle. And a general relationship breakup is something our system is designed to handle.
Right.
We like trees, we build better bark.
Yeah.
And we've taken something that is part of our evolution and we've stunted it. So now we have generations of people that can't handle discourse, they can't handle disagreement, they can't
Mhm.
handle discomfort. And that can be very dangerous to the evolution of a society.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. And as you were talking, I'm thinking like, children who get whoopings,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Versus children who get beat. Then now it's all turned into trauma, because I got disciplined, now I have this trauma. And it kind of just follows them and they develop that identity to it, right?
Yeah, yeah. Instead of finding the growth in it, we're moving into a victimization of it.
Right.
And that's not a healthy way to move through life.
Yeah. Now, when we talk about the victimization of trauma, give
Hmm.
me your take on that, because when you do experience certain traumas,
Hmm.
you are vulnerable. You are in a place where you are not in control. You are in a place where, at the time, you have been treated as a victim. You are a victim to the circumstances. So, how does one take themselves out of that victim stance once they've come out of the trauma? How do they take themselves out of that or grow out of that, to kind of better start to live life?
Great question. I want to backtrack a little and just make to clarify. When I'm talking about discomfort is like when my son had his phone taken away
Hmm.
and it was a horrific, traumatic event to him.
Yeah,
It was not causing him any harm.
yeah,
There was no 10 years from now, there's not going to be any long-term effects of not having his phone for 2 months. That's very different than a domestic violence survivor who is a victim of domestic violence. So I want to sort of recognize the spectrum of the conversation
yeah,
for those listening that we want to honor. I want to honor victims, but also what happens is if we stay in victim mode, we never step out of it.
Right.
So even domestic violence victims have to, there has to be a point where they start to heal and move forward in time
Hmm.
and make choices that empower them so that they no longer see themselves as victims.
Right.
Okay, so I like
Yeah.
I know that like we've jumped in the conversation a little bit, but I know that audience members listening, I want to be very mindful of different circumstances.
Yeah. And it's like I guess I'm gonna use this analogy. It's like the soft side and the hard side, right?
Yeah,
of life and of natural circumstances that we all experience, but the way that society, the way that psychology even sometimes have allowed people to define it, have allowed
yeah,
people to have these different pockets of it. You can define taking your phone away in such a manner where it was just like, that was traumatic, that did something to them, and that, but it's like honing it in to say like, no, this is a normal part of life, and this is something that there's cause and effect, there's punishment, there's all these things that in order for you to become the citizen you're supposed to become, these things have to happen, right? So when we talk about so going back to the question of trauma, where do you what made you go into the metaphysical portion of trauma versus just trauma in general?
oh, great question. I during my deployment I had these clear senses open up, and that again, that wasn't part of the plan, so I had to figure out what to do with that. And as I was moving through life trying to recover from my own PTSD and physical injuries, I would hear these voices say, pay attention. So I'd be in the VA hospital and I would look down at someone's feet and I would see the cracks in their heels, and the voice would say, pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
So then I started paying more attention to other people that had cracks in their heels. Or I would be in a networking meeting and someone would say a certain phrase and I would hear that voice say, pay attention. And then I started making these links between physical ailments and unprocessed traumas. In 2019, a very dear friend of mine, my closest friend in Las Vegas, went into a minor surgery and never came out.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew her private stories. And the voice in my head was like, that's what happens when we don't process our traumas. Our immune system can no longer hold the trauma, and it can't fight when something simple as a minor surgery occurs.
Yeah.
Pay attention. And so I had that in the back of my head. And then 6 weeks later, after her death, I was in what I thought was cardiac pain. It was just intense, intense pain, and I didn't know any different. I went to the ER 4 times over 5 days, thinking something was really wrong with my heart.
Yeah.
And it was later diagnosed as fibromyalgia. And
Mm-hmm.
that voice came in again and said, pay attention. This is grief. So then I started studying and paying attention to other people that had fibromyalgia symptoms, and it showed me how chronic complex grief, not just one individual passing away, having a funeral, it was the culmination of everything I had done. The leaving the military, the betrayal of the military, the betrayal of my ex-husband, all of these things, my childhood stacked up to the point where my nervous system could not handle anymore, and my muscular skeletal system went berserk.
Mm-hmm.
And that voice said, pay attention, you're not alone. This is the beginning of your research. Not in the same ways, but it was
Yeah.
translated in that way. And so I started diving into other diseases, lipedema, uh, cardiac distress, migraines, neck pain, back pain, lower back pain, hip joint pain. And then I'm starting to see these patterns between the medical and the mental health, and the two lanes don't cross.
Yeah.
So as a metaphysician, I'm having this psychic capability to look at the story and to ask questions from a zoomed up, zoomed out. Like, let's look at the belief system. Let's look at the body. Let's look at the whole story. And that, in doing that for so many years, you just naturally move into trauma research.
Yeah. And I love how you explained that, because just listening to you about it, it made me more aware of my own body, right? And it made me
Yeah.
aware of my own nervous system, of that pay attention. So
Yeah.
many times we overlook something.
Mhm.
I have heart issues. I've had a heart attack. I've had heart surgery. So I've had these things, but I've also come from a lot of trauma too, and I've come from a lot of grief and all these things. And so when you were speaking, like I could feel that, like when you were saying like your nervous system, it has nowhere else to go. And so
Yeah.
you feel like you can't run outside of your body, you can't run. So it starts to activate certain things within you, within your joints and within your head and within all these places where you're just like, my body is on fire and I don't know what to do with it, right?
Yeah, it's screaming for help,
Yeah,
screaming. That's the roar. But before that, there were probably years of whispers leading up to that.
yeah,
And we
definitely.
didn't know how to listen for the whispers. We were never taught
Yeah,
that the two can cross. When we were growing up, we were never taught that mental health and physical health were intimately related.
right. Yeah,
Like we would never think that mental illness could be a bodily disorder, a biological disorder.
yeah. And I
Doctors would say,
think,
"Oh, it's just genetic."
yeah, and I think a lot of the times, as close as they've gotten to it, outside of here recently, where people really started paying attention and doing the research, they would just say, stress causes headaches, stress causes migraines, right?
Mhm.
But that's as close as they would get to the mental health portion showing up physically.
Yeah,
Yeah,
not the allostatic load, not the overwhelm. It's like, oh, it's your job, it's your current events, but not, hey, you could be carrying great grandma's
hmm,
sexual betrayal, and that's why you're having reproductive issues.
yeah.
We're not zooming up and zooming out and looking at the grand story.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Let's see. So let's talk about that then. Let's talk about the traditional mental health and the medical society's history and as
Mhm.
it is today. Talk to us about how things have kind of evolved and where people are missing the mark. And what does society's outlook on medicine and on mental health? How is that playing a part in everyone's health?
I think the greatest celebration is that we're moving out of opioids,
Okay.
which was a big epidemic in our society, and we're moving into non-traditional. So psychedelics 20 years ago was taboo.
Hmm.
And now we've got so much research showing how psychedelics can help heal the mind, which, like, let's be real, let's use the language. Psychedelics are metaphysical.
Yeah.
We don't really know how that superconscious works in a physical way. We can't measure it because every single person has a different experience. And that's what makes it metaphysical. Metaphysics being meta, Greek for the word beyond, it's beyond what we can currently measure.
Yeah.
And for those listening, 2000 years ago, the weather was metaphysical.
Hmm.
We thought it was the gods being angry. And now we have science to measure it. It's no longer metaphysical, it's now physical. So psychedelics, like the current research, and it's really thankful that the Department of Defense funded it because they really pushed big to help veterans. And that's what really got the momentum rolling in normalizing non-traditional methods of helping people with mental health.
Yeah.
So acupuncture, chiropractic, psychedelic, they're all they're all really getting traction now that we didn't have 20, 30 years ago.
Right. And just as in what I do as a Reiki practitioner, energy
Reiki.
healing, yeah, it's in the
Mhm.
hospitals now. They're using it for people with cancer. They're using it, for all sorts of things. And it's like, once the human mind gets out of its own way, then
Yeah.
we can start realizing what the body is really working with, and how to work with the body instead of trying to control it in a sense to make it make sense to a dollar, right? Make
Yeah.
sense to a system, make sense to some sort of program, because really our bodies, our minds, our brains, everything that it works, it's its own system. So I'm glad that this sort of research is being done and that nothing can be hidden anymore, right? Because it's hard for people to just turn a blind eye like they used to, because
Yeah.
they're realizing there's so much that they don't know. They're realizing that it's so much that only the human mind can really, to it's like you can only go so far until you go outside of the box, metaphysical, you go outside of what you think is normal, and you start to like, oh, okay,
Mhm.
this does make sense, right? When I do this, they do have some sort of reaction, not only mentally, but physically, not physically, but mentally. So it all corresponds together. Um, let's see. So you mentioned, the history of the great grandmother,
Mhm.
sexual assault, things of that nature. Tell us about what you think about inherited trauma.
Inherited trauma, and that's another. Epigenetics is new. It's new in the past, I'd say, decade and a half. We weren't understanding the science behind inherited trauma,
Yeah.
and now we have much more research coming out with epigenetics showing. And Rachel Yehuda, she presented a research study recently looking at Holocaust survivors and their grandchildren. We have Harvard has the study of adult development in understanding well-being, and that's been going on for 90 something years.
Mm-hmm.
But we're just now talking about how um, systemic systemic abuse. We're talking about so I'll give an example of that is if our great grandmother was under serious threat of sexual violation, that gets passed down to our grandmother
Hmm.
because our grandmother will be a fetus in the womb carrying those emotions.
Right.
And then our grandmother, when she was pregnant with our mother, is now passing down into the fetus.
Hmm.
And as the fetus, and this is one of my research focuses, is looking at the ribs, because as our ribs form to protect our organs, they're also absorbing the emotions of our mothers.
Okay.
So that becomes the trauma in our bones,
Okay.
and we are developing those bones before birth.
Got it.
So when we look at something like if we look at racism, when we look 5, 6 generations back, our ancestors, regardless of where we were in the world, there were always groups being at a disadvantage. And so when those groups are abused, that gets added into that gets passed down. Just as the stories do verbally, so do the stories in the body.
Yeah.
So when doctors say, "Oh, that's genetic," it's like, yes, it's genetic, but it's emotionally inherited.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're inheriting the fear, we're inheriting the grief, we're inheriting the rage of injustice.
Yeah.
And so we can't just get over it
Right.
because it's literally in our bones.
Yeah, I had made a post, I want to say maybe last year or a year or so ago, about Black men and their anger. And
Yeah,
and I was saying that, it's no wonder that this anger has continued to go on, because this is coming from slaves. This is coming from,
yes,
having these owners, and even going as far as saying, of knowing how Black men were even raped. They
yes,
were like, all of
yes,
these things were going on. And so these things are inheritedly in them, as far as the fear, as far as the hate, even as far as how they feel about Black women. Because,
yes,
yes, because Black women they were either in the house getting raped by the master, or they were having the kids and they couldn't, all of these things. And it's like, when we think about all of those things being passed down and nowhere to express them,
yeah,
nowhere,
you
no
can't
one,
release it anywhere.
yeah, no one to dissect how you're feeling and why you're feeling like this. You have all the rage, you have all the fear, you have all these things that are trying to come out some way, and
Yeah,
all you know is to hurt each other, or to go around with this stigma of bravado, because you're afraid of someone, generational things, you're afraid of someone coming and molesting you out of your manhood, right?
yeah.
I mean,
And that sense
it's
of
so deep.
helplessness
Yeah.
brings in a layer of rage.
Yeah, definitely. It gets really, really deep. I love that,
Yeah,
that you mentioned that. And so that's part of the work that I do with shadow working, right?
yeah,
So we're talking about inherited trauma, we're talking about conditioning. When we have parents who come from this long line of everything, all they're doing is showing up and raising you in the way that they were raised, or in the way that is far on the other end of the spectrum, trying to get away from the way that they were raised. If you don't come to an agreement within yourself of saying, I have to, something has to change. I want to change. I no longer want to be a victim to my circumstances or a victim to my conditioning. What can I do to bring myself out of that? All right. So this all goes into this next part that we're going to talk about with you too, the 6 layers of belonging. Let's talk
Yeah.
about that.
So as I have gone through and working with clients from all over the world, I've had 15 countries in 5 years, clients in 15 countries. This pattern just kept repeating of, as I heal, what's the point of healing?
Mm-hmm.
So some people will say, like, what's the point of healing? Why am I going to do all this work for what? And what they couldn't see was the purpose, the usefulness, the meaning. And we are creatures that have to have meaning.
Yeah.
Viktor Frankl talks about this in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, where he recounts 3 years as a Holocaust survivor in concentration camps. And he talks about how some people just couldn't find enough purpose to anchor forward and survive, and they would let themselves go. It was too much.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't have a way to establish meaning in our pain, we don't have a reason to heal.
Okay.
So when we're looking at the 6 layers of belonging, if I don't heal as Annie, my household is affected. If my household is dysfunctional, my friends and family pick up on that dysfunction. It adds to their dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
Then they go out into the community and it adds to the community. And then it adds to the nation. And we're seeing this now.
Yeah.
A nation of dysregulation, which was very systematically induced by perpetuating fear.
Yeah.
Then that affects our belief systems, because we all have this collection of beliefs, whether it's ideological, political, religious, spiritual, household, cultural. That all forms our outer layer of beliefs. It's the hard shell, and everything we do goes from the center out to the hard shell and back.
Mm-hmm.
Our beliefs are always impacting everyone around us.
Yeah.
So as we heal and we see the world in a more zoomed up, zoomed out way, the wise way, the wisdom, those wisdom makers or wisdom seekers raise the level of awareness in their household, then amongst their friends and family, then amongst the community, then in the nation, and then it strengthens their belief system, and it shows our children, because our children really need to see the world in a safer way. For them to feel safe enough to create and to explore and to challenge themselves, they have to feel safe. The nervous system has to not be dysregulated. But if we don't take steps to help lower that dysregulation rate of a nation, of a community, of a household, then we have children that we are now moving forward and participating in their cycle of trauma.
Yeah.
We're not stopping the cycle, we are perpetuating it. So the 6 layers of belonging shows how trauma ripples, but it also shows how healing ripples
Mm-hmm.
through the layers. And as a society, when we understand that our choices impact so many more people, we now have an obligation as stewards of ourselves, stewards of our household, stewards of our friends and family, to find meaning in our suffering, to heal from it, and then to help other people move through it.
Right. Yeah. And that's accountability, and that's
Huge.
responsibility, right?
Huge.
And the unfortunate part is, like, how do you get in there when it's so deep? People are, when they're going through the trauma, they're enamored in it, they're living in it. And so if you don't have that person of wisdom in the house, or if that person of wisdom is young, like I said, I came from a traumatic background too. And I was young, but I was the mediator, but I didn't have the authority to really stop things, right? So when you have the wisdom seeker in there, that can make some change in there. But everybody is just kind of doing what they're doing, the balls get dropped. And so, in your opinion, if there's even a way at all, when you find yourself in a situation like that, and your inside world is chaotic, how do we get that piece of information that you just said? How do we get that in that home or in those people?
Somebody has to step forward first.
Yeah,
And if we're looking to the left and we're looking to the right and no one's moving, chances are it's us.
yeah,
That in our healing, we're at least not bleeding our traumas on other people.
yeah. Managing yourself.
Take responsibility of what we are contributing to.
Hmm.
And then when we do that, it lowers their response,
Hmm.
their reactive uh, response to how we are approaching it. And this isn't a magic wand by Monday
Hmm.
solution by any means. It's taken us generations to get to this point. It's going to
Right.
take us generations to cycle out of it. But if we don't start being mindful and aware of how our actions impact others, then we're not really participating in the healing of of the very thing that we're complaining is broken.
Yeah. And I like how you said that it takes generations. It's
It
over
does.
generations. And that is the perfect answer, really, to what I was asking, because there's no way to interject in that if that's not there. Right. And if you have a wisdom seeker in the home, then most likely, if as they go through their life and they go through their journey, they're going to set out to do things a little bit differently. Right. They're going to
Yeah.
set out to at least change some sort of the trajectory for their children, even if it's not all, because again, generational, right? And so I think that when you, that analogy of when you know better, you do better,
Yes,
that's true,
yes.
right? Yeah. And that's how evolution happens, right? Um,
We have to
so
do this as a culture, as a
yeah.
community, because one person changing is just a piece of grain of sand.
Hmm.
But when we have thousands of people, now we're rewriting culture.
Yeah.
We're saying we no longer accept the way it was, and as a culture, we are shifting into a healthier space.
Yeah.
And until there's enough people to push back, we don't see change. And we've seen this through history. We as women wouldn't have been able to vote if the
Hmm.
women before us 100 years ago didn't step up and say this is not acceptable.
Right.
And it took 80 years. The suffrage era was 80 something years. It took
Yeah.
80 to be able to vote that we take for granted.
Hmm.
Why would you not vote?
Yeah.
Our
Yeah. Yeah.
for the civil rights, for women to be able to have equal pay, for women to be able to have a credit card.
Yeah.
It took generations to make those changes. And and so we have to decide what we want to change today and hope that our children pick up where we leave off.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that in this, I don't, because this part of life is a mixture of generations. But I think
Sure.
that this genre of life that we're living right now, I think that we're closer than ever than we've ever been, because there are a collective of people who do what we do, who do, there is a big community. And what used to be taboo is no longer taboo, right? What used to be, the woo woo stuff and the, why are you thinking of all of that? It's no longer, because there's evidence behind it. It's just no longer just scientific or someone just in a lab coming up with things. There's evidence behind the outcomes of what's going on. So would you say, and this is kind of going like spiritual metaphysical, would you say that, because I'm stuck on that word, wisdom seekers,
Let's
would
do
you
it. Let's
say that wisdom seekers are born or made?
Ooh, nature nurture. I don't know. I I think I was born this way. I just didn't have the catalyst.
Hmm.
Like I came into this world with the instruction manual, but I needed the I needed the catalyst to trigger it on. And
Okay.
that was my deployment.
Okay.
Up until my deployment, it was a full 180. Like I was doing something completely different. Didn't I've always been spiritual, but not this. This
Yeah.
this is deeply embedded, uh, lifetime commitment. And I didn't, that's not what I was doing back then. So it was this catalyst that pushed me because I had no other choice but to be in this place.
Mm.
Other
Yeah.
people, it's going to be a little bit more subtle. And it's, is it nature versus nurture? I think it's both. I
Okay.
think it's both.
Okay. And that, I think that that is valid too, because like you said, you were born into it. I was born into it, but life had to teach us how to work it, right?
Yeah.
We had to be put in situations and have experiences to know what to do with it or to be aware of what it even is. So I think that is that's true. I don't, in that aspect, I believe is true. I don't believe that it's made in a sense of just anybody can come and do it. Like, I think that there are, a collective of people, or chosen people that are set upon this earth to come and do some things and
Mhm.
bring more of the collective awareness around, the things that we're talking about. Would you share that same thought processing, or what is your thought on that?
I think everyone has something,
Yes.
but I, and I, in addition to trauma work, I work with metaphysical to help people advance metaphysically in their natural gifts.
Mhm.
So some people, it's working with animals, whether they're on a farm or they're psychic, they have psychic capabilities with animals, or it's with plants, or it's the environment. I have clients, their superpower is in working with aliens and extraterrestrials.
Mhm.
I think everyone comes with something.
Yeah.
Some people come in, their job is just to be a darn good parent.
Yeah.
That is what they were built with, and they're here to raise really good kids.
Yeah.
Kids that then will become change makers later. I think we all have something, so it's which category or which sector do we fall in?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so there's a small sector, very, very tiny, that's here to help move the world forward in
Right.
healing and awareness. But everyone can contribute somewhere on the pie slice. They fall somewhere in there. Like a
Yeah.
Trivial Pursuit pie, they're going to fall in one of those colors.
Yeah. Definitely. I agree with that. I do agree with that. When we talk about these sectors and we talk about even your deployment,
Mhm.
um, what would you say was the moment, the defining moment for you in your deployment that that light bulb went off? Just, like things are totally different for you, or that you're a totally different person.
May 28th,
Okay.
back in the beginning of this interview, I had said how the enemy was not the problem.
Yeah.
So on May 28th, I'm heading into Iraq. Our plane starts to get shot at.
Okay.
And it's like middle of the night. We're coming out of a Marine base. We're heading toward Baghdad because my final destination was Taji. That's where my money was. I had to go get to Taji. And it's like hot and it's rumbly. If you've never been on an airplane before, on a C-130 military aircraft, cargo craft, it like vibrates like a really loud generator, and it's just
Mm.
loud and grumbly, and it's humid because it's the summer desert heat, and like you're not really aware, and you're in full battle rattle, and it's heavy. You got the Kevlar helmet. Like as soon as you go from Kuwait to Iraq in the airspace, you got a full battle rattle up,
Yeah.
and so we're just hot and we're not comfortable, and then we hear tink, 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 tink. And before I had really the opportunity to figure out what was happening, within like 3 seconds, the voice came in and said, "You're going to be okay."
Mm. Okay.
So I exhaled, and I remember looking around, and the gunners are in the windows, and you got the communication going upstairs to the pilots. And on C-130s, it's cargo netting, so it's like old long, like really sturdy seatbelt
Yeah.
things. So your hands can go in and brace so that when you're moving, it holds you better, and it rather than whiplash from combat movement, like your Kevlar helmet's not going to hit anything hard. So you're like bracing. So we're bracing and we're getting shot at. And that voice said, "You're going to be okay." And that voice had come so many times in my past, but I didn't pay attention to it. I just thought it was my consciousness, it was something else. That moment that moment when when you're getting shot at,
Yeah.
you take those words very differently. You take them very seriously. And I exhaled, and my nervous system just felt really at peace while our plane is getting shot at. So I joke and I say, even in my book, I say that moment was the least of my worries.
Hmm.
It was everything else that came after it. It was the dysfunctional leadership. It was the divorce. It was rebuilding my body because jumping out of C-130s after getting shot at my knees, my ankles, and my wrist got injured. Like we had to get off the
Hmm.
flight line, and we're running with all this baggage, and so the weight and the tension and the adrenaline kind of cracked some things. So I'm on crutches. All these things are happening after this moment, but that was the catalyst of you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And some part of me knew that was the beginning of my story.
Okay. Okay. And with that being the beginning of your story, how did how did you start to notice that your mental health was starting to affect your physical health?
I don't know that I don't know that I knew it on the deployment. It wasn't until this massive collision hit.
Okay.
I came home spinning to a husband that was completely dissociated.
Okay.
10 years, and there was no, he was like, "Oh, great, you're home. Go back to cooking the meals. Go back to participating in paying the bills." Like it was like a handover, and I'm like, I'm spinning, and I can't grab any of these roles.
Yeah.
Do you not see I'm falling? And that grief, that betrayal of I've been married to this man for 10 years, and he doesn't see me falling.
Yeah.
That hit hard.
Yeah.
That hit hard. So I was spinning, but I still could not name it.
Okay.
I just thought like this is normal. Like people are coming back from deployment. This is normal. It wasn't until I fell to my knees, there was nothing left in me. One day in the middle, like beginning of end of March, beginning of April of 2017, I'm going up to my second floor stairs. I trip over my feet. I'm on my knees. There was no more battery juice in me.
Mm.
I was at zero. Like that's when I knew we had a problem.
Yeah. And you were how old at that time, if you don't mind me asking?
Uh, 40, 41,
Okay. All right.
41.
So in that process, were you thinking like perimenopause? Were you thinking
No,
nothing of that sort? Okay.
no. When I fell to my knees, I didn't have enough energy left to even get up off my knees.
Got it.
I was at zero, and it wasn't ideation,
Mm-hmm.
suicidal ideation. It was there was no more energy left in my body to fight things.
Yeah.
That's when I said, okay, we got a problem. Like that was my roar, and the roar could not get any louder. I could not get up off the floor. And I'm
Mm.
just like sitting there and I'm like crying, bawling, like, God, take this all from me. Like I can't even get myself up off the floor. That's how much in denial I was of how much I was carrying.
Yeah. Yeah. And not only, not only physically, like literally, but also mentally,
Yeah,
emotionally, and how much that you had already adopted coming back into
yeah,
your civilian life of a husband that was not there. So that was another load that you were carrying. Um,
yeah.
how do you feel that there was a part in your marriage prior to your deployment that was already gone, and then at this point you just snapped and realized like he's not really here with me? Did that happen, or did it happen while you were gone?
I I didn't know how to measure the whispers.
Got it.
The roar hit April. It was like it was Easter weekend of April 2017, Saturday afternoon, and I asked for the divorce.
Okay.
By Sunday evening, he had purchased a 6-month subscription to Match.com.
Oh wow.
And that was I'm not even someone I was a position.
Mm.
I was a seat filler. That was the phrase is, Annie, you were a seat filler.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with you. It had to do with him having a wife.
Yeah.
And that betrayal hit me of, he was never in love with me to begin with,
Mm,
because it was no different than resigning from a job. I resigned my position and he reposted it on a job site.
yeah. Yeah.
And that was like, I've just been filling a chair. It was never about me. And so that just added all sorts of things to the list.
I'm curious about that too, because I know earlier you had mentioned the betrayal of the military.
Yeah.
People of higher ranks and things of that nature, and then coming back with your husband and with that betrayal. How did that all coincide within your mind? Like, just did you start to develop this angst towards men? Did you start to develop? Did you right? Did you start to just feel like you, as an Annie, were just a ploy and being used everywhere that you were?
It wasn't until I started writing the book. Because if anyone's ever interested in writing a book on trauma, to write about a book on trauma using your own personal stories put you through the trauma again. Just
Yeah,
disclaimer for anyone thinking like this would be a good idea to write my story. You're going to go through the feels all over again, probably more intensely because you have more awareness of what should have happened,
yeah,
the neglect. So as I'm writing this book, I'm realizing every male in my life, and this is my story. So I,
mhm,
males listening to this, we all have a story. We all have a theme. My lesson in life has been heavily misogynistic.
mhm,
So I laugh. Yes, Chris, I laugh because I realize my father was 33 when he married my 17-year-old mother.
mm,
She was from Lebanon, didn't speak English, she only spoke Arabic and French.
okay,
He didn't speak any other language other than English. So these two people who should never have been together to begin with were following culture, but it was not compatible for two people that already had trauma.
yeah,
So then I'm born 9 months after my 17-year-old mother just turned 17, gets married 2 days later, gets pregnant with me in the next menstrual cycle. Like,
mm, yeah,
so I was a reflection to my father of the life he didn't get to have because of his cultural expectations.
got it.
So all this responsibility was placed on me. So as I'm like flashing back in these stories, I'm realizing my father, my brothers, the military men, my ex-husband, I've had a lifetime of having to overcompensate. And that, in writing the book, I re had to reprocess the traumas that I had been through because I didn't have the awareness to even label it back then.
Yeah,
It just was. This is just what we do. Women just put up with it in the military. Women just deal with it in the household. This is my role. This is what I was taught.
yeah,
I didn't realize as I was carrying a card that said I am your rescuer,
mm,
and that made everything in my life dysfunctional because I thought I was supposed to be proud of carrying this rescuer card,
right,
but I should never have had that membership card to begin with.
right,
Yeah.
yeah. And so there we go with those generational things that have been passed down too, right?
Yep. Yep.
And then wearing those conditioned things as a badge of honor. And when it's actually just a hindrance for you, and it labels you in such a way, energetically labels you in such a way of prey, like your husband, like, oh yeah, she's the one that's going to show up the way that I need her to show up for me, because of my damage and because of my trauma. So, I always tell my clients, like, people can sniff you out. They'll sniff you out and they'll take you and they'll take advantage of you and leave you empty, which is what you pretty much experienced. And so coming back from all of that, so like you said, when you came back, your world was just spinning. You were spinning, your world was spinning. That's nervous
Oh,
system,
yeah.
right? That's your nervous
On level
system.
10.
Your on on a
Yeah.
hundred. And so you fall to your knees, that physically I am depleted, mentally I am depleted. now this kind of comes into those areas that we were talking about of how trauma comes out of your body, right? How it has nowhere else to go. And so your nervous system was definitely shocked. Talk to us about your nervous system and how it ties into um, all the emotions and the physical things that you were experiencing at the time.
So my knees had been injured and I was already wobbling.
Mm,
Power walking was my Prior to that, power walking was the way I expelled energy.
got
So
it?
now I can't expel energy because I can't walk without
Hmm.
crutches or without limping. And it's boiling in me. So I'm starting to pay attention to my inability to think. So it would take me 6 minutes to read an email. That should have taken me 30 seconds. Excuse me.
Hmm.
And I'm being put in a position where all I can do is sit and watch TV because
Got it.
there's not a lot of energy left in me at that point. So I'm watching TED Talks. I'm watching all of these series on healing, and that's when I started doing the journaling and I started diving into what was going on inside of me and
Hmm.
giving it a different place to go because I wasn't excuse me. I wasn't able to use physical action to do that. So I had to be in some other way. And I was using automatic writing, journaling, um, capturing my thoughts to get me there.
Yeah. Everything that you've experienced from leaving the military, then coming back home, and just your whole system kind of falling apart on you. How did you tie that to your nervous system? How did you know that your nervous system was really taking a hit from everything that you've experienced?
I knew at some level that I was overwhelmed, that I was overloaded. But it wasn't until I left that house, I walked away from that house and we had a rental. I moved back in my rental. And I'm sitting in a living room with nothing else to do. And I'm watching these TED Talks and I'm watching these Oprah interviews. And then it led me into metaphysics with Dolores Cannon videos on YouTube.
I love
And so
Dolores
I started
Cannon.
reading her
Yeah.
books and they started opening things up. And as they're opening up, I'm feeling things unlocking in me. And that
Hmm.
was the big awareness of I'm awakening more as I'm healing more. So
Yeah.
as I'm paying more attention to how people are healing in her books, it's clicking in that this is a part of my path too. And
Yeah.
so I'm paying more attention to how the superconscious has the capacity to help heal, which then led me to pay more attention to the messages that my body was telling me.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you pay attention to the super conscious, because that's your higher self
Yeah,
pretty much, right? We have this higher self, and we have this spirit, and then we have our human bodies, and just there's multiple we're multidimensional
yeah,
beings, and we have a way that higher self, which is the one that's really been talking to you this whole time, has a way of filtering into our brains, right? Filtering into our nervous system, into our cells, and just making those dings kind of go off, making us acknowledge, there's something wrong. It's kind of like our alarm
yeah,
system,
yeah.
so to speak. Yeah. And so, how did you get your nervous system back regulated? I know it took a while, especially coming from everything that you
And
experienced.
it's still taking a while. It's still in progress.
Mm,
It The more I studied quantum healing, and that's in my credentials during that time period, I started the quantum healing hypnosis technique. And that voice in the back of my
okay.
mind said, This is for you to understand, not for you to do. You're going to have your own modalities,
Mm,
but you need to understand the foundation of this first. And that was very accurate. I did develop my own modalities later on, about 2020, 2021. And then I pursued a doctorate in metaphysics.
okay.
So, of course, as you're doing this research and you're diving in, by default, you're learning about yourself. I started
Right.
shedding and letting more go. And um, even now, I'm still learning a lot about my body. I back in
Yeah.
July, June of last year, I did a macro psilocybin event. I did a macro psilocybin event, and in that very heightened state of awareness, I was so connected to my superconscious, to my higher self,
Hmm.
with very close. And it showed me all the miscarriages and how the grief sat in my hip flexors. And it showed me how my meridians lit up, and I could see where the blocks were. And
Yeah.
that and my ribs too. That's where I learned about the ribs. It was like this classroom I went into and said, "You're going to be studying this. This is part of your research. You need to understand trauma in the bones."
Yeah.
And it showed me the trauma in my bones, and the rage that I've carried for the women, both sides of my family. So as the massage therapist is pushing on the ribs, and my higher conscious said, "It's this rib and this rib, like this
Hmm.
vertebra and this vertebra." So as she's pushing, I'm like growling, this growling
Yeah.
of ancestral misogyny was coming out of my body. Justice.
Yeah.
And that gave me greater awareness of how much we really carry in our bodies, how much our nervous system
Yeah.
is really doing a lot of work just to be an average human.
Yeah.
Never mind those that are carrying boulders of trauma stones. So
Yeah.
that I've learned how to heal as I've researched more about healing.
Yeah, definitely. And and us understanding that, well, how important the psychological and the physical realm really
Oh,
is, because we release through our tissues, we release through our joints, we release through our cells, all of these things, and there it's all a chemical compound too. And so no wonder why you have a person who's in depression and they're, feeling X, Y, and Z in these particular areas. It's because this chemical compound is coming down. These cells are connecting together and everyone's haywire. So it's like one of us has to get together and get it together, right? Whether if it's going the route that you went and having the massage and getting that release, unblocking that area so that the energy, so that the air, so that the fluidity can flow through back into the area within your brain that's going to say, we're okay, we can figure out a resolution to this. Now let's go to the next thing, because it's all a flow. And people don't understand when things are blocked up from trauma, from sexual abuse, from mental abuse, from all sorts of experiences, you will feel scattered. You will have reproductive issues, you will have digestive issues, you will feel confusion, you'll be in a cloud all the time. It all goes
yeah.
together, right? um
And chronic is harder to
so
measure.
say that one more
Chronic is
time.
harder to measure. We just feel blah. We just feel tired, and it's harder because we can't name it.
Yeah, and a lot of the times, unfortunately, how we were talking about earlier, as far as the medical society today, um, that part is kind of falling by the wayside a little bit too, because it wants to hold on to so much of the Western
Yeah.
culture in medicine, and it's not willing to, whether politics or money or what have you, it's not willing to kind of venture over and see how these things kind of connect. So now we do have, researchers such as you are getting your, because you're a doctor,
I have a
right? Doctor
doctorate
of
in
metaphysics.
metaphysics.
Yeah. So we have doctors in metaphysics. We have integrative doctors, who are kind of really getting into the groove and saying these things are interconnected. And So when we're talking about the chronic illnesses, um, a lot of the times it's being misdiagnosed or undertreated because people are not aware of it and doctors do not know how to treat it.
Yeah. Or they'll say,
Yeah.
I that's not my lane.
Yeah. And not really know even who to send you to. Right. So it's like, well, we're going to send you to we're going
We're gonna give
to
you
just,
medication.
yeah.
We're gonna
Yeah. We're just going to give you medication. And then you come back when your liver is not working anymore. Right. So with that being said, your experiences obviously shifted your perspectives about self, about life, about people, about society, about a lot of things. And what did you kind of come to a consensus with when it came to your own mortality, your own trauma, and your own emotional state?
in terms of mortality, I I am not afraid of death.
Mm,
I'm afraid of not making a bigger impact in this world.
mm, mm,
I think when we are exposed to something that other people are not, experiences, we have an obligation to share that history. That's where that wisdom comes in, right? The wise
mm,
elders that we're missing in our society, that shared experience that they moved through, that they can go help other people move through. We have an obligation to help people see what they can't
mm,
see when they're willing to see it.
mhm.
I feel very much like my purpose now is to take what I know, to continue honing it and sharpening it, but then sharing it so other people can cross the bridge too with a little bit less suffering.
Yeah. And I have a 23-year-old. And so when I hear you saying that we have to teach the next generation certain things, I believe that yes, we have to meet them where they are, but we also have to get them to an understanding of what we learned still matters. And what
Yes.
we learned and what we're giving them knowledge of is still a part of life that is going to accompany them upon their journey, right? And things that they're able to pull from. It may not look the same, but when you're dealing with another person, when you're in another situation, the a lot of the things repeat itself. You know, history repeats itself a lot, and so I would like for more people who are in my son's generation or even people in our generation where they can meet the younger generation a little bit more of where they're at. I don't know if I could necessarily do that. Everything is not for everyone, right? But just giving them an importance of why history and understanding and experience and perspectives in some ways are important, right?
I think with history, part of why we keep repeating history is because we're not telling it with accuracy.
Mm,
If you go to Germany, it's really hard to leave Berlin and not see the history, and it's very prominent. So it's this message that says we will not repeat this again.
yeah,
It's told with accuracy, it's not whitewashed. But in our society, we whitewash, we clean it up, and we make it something it's not. And so we
yeah,
keep repeating history because we're not telling it with accuracy.
yeah. And so
Talking
it keeps, yeah, it keeps seeming like that makes total sense because it gets watered
about
down and
yeah.
it seems like it's irrelevant, right?
Now, and the wrong people are framed as heroes.
Mm,
And so when
yeah,
we don't tell it with accuracy, our let's call it soul. Our soul knows the truth. Our superconscious, our higher self knows the truth.
yeah,
So if we're telling one story and our wisdom within says this is not matching, of course we're going to repeat history.
yeah,
There's an inconsistency.
yeah. Until someone gets it,
Yep.
right? Okay. So all the work that you do, your research, your working with your clients, um, all the things that you're unfolding, why do you think that this is so important at this time in space?
I think we have, through the past decade especially, relinquished a lot of power to people that we have assigned as being in a position of authority.
Mm.
And that means that our IQ is not being challenged, our critical thinking is not being challenged, our ability to handle discomfort is not being challenged. So if we don't course correct, we are going to devolve as a society.
Yeah.
And what we're really doing is we're setting up our children and our grandchildren for failure.
Yep.
Because now we're taking the power away from them to create their own dream, their own future, which is the very opposite of what we were told, right? The American dream,
Hmm.
own our own business, we can, uh, and so we have to be really careful not to regress and to be really mindful of progression.
Yeah.
We have to evolve. Once we
Yeah.
de-evolve, then we lose the strength as a society. We lose humanity.
Yeah.
And so in a very wide lens, big idea sort of way, we have to care
Hmm. Yeah. And not just care about where we are or where we've come from, but where we're going,
where we're going.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And with that being said, where do you feel that research is going? How do you think that that's going to evolve over time?
My research will eventually become mainstream, but that could take 20 years.
Okay.
20 years to say if someone has this disease, we may not be able to measure the amount of anger the liver is flushing, but we can at least measure that the anger is on taking a toll on the liver.
Mm.
And the liver does process a lot of anger. So if
Yeah.
we start to see liver enzymes shifting, if we start to see something, we need to be able to say, okay, are we trying to take on too much anger, and do we need to take steps to reduce our anger to preserve our liver? And we do that with all the other organs in our body when we start to feel things. So the future of my work is getting people into their belief systems, to understand their
Mm.
belief systems, to then understand the body, to then understand the mind,
Mm.
not the other way around.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. Um, what are the tools that you're using for research? Like, what's your diagnostic tools that you're using? Is it merely just not merely? Is it purely just through like blood tests
No,
or
it's observational. It's more,
okay,
I'm working in a capacity that is a bit more advanced than mental health psychotherapeutic modalities.
okay,
So the modalities that I use, the black room, the mural method, I have access to an ancestral tree. Those are all easy ways for the mind to participate. So unlike quantum healing hypnosis, where the mind gets sedated in hypnosis, I very much want to teach the mind to be a better partner with its higher self.
got it.
The two to communicate and understand the roles. So I use my own modalities, and in doing that, over 7 years now as a full-time practice, there's just certain patterns that keep repeating.
Okay.
I've had a client, she had a rare, irreversible genetic disease that caused legal blindness.
Hmm.
Service dog, Braille, blind school. By the fifth session, she was starting to see again.
Okay.
About 6 months after, she was starting to see color. Now she can see distance.
Okay.
But the medical community would have said, it's a rare, irreversible genetic condition. You need to, settle down and get used to this.
Right.
Her belief system said, I don't want this anymore. And we worked at the superconscious level to lift it up.
Hmm.
So it may not be lab work, but we can see her childhood trauma in the amount of atrocities that she witnessed. Her eyes couldn't witness it anymore. It was such
Yeah.
a violation of her moral code of what she witnessed as a child, that saying, I don't want to see this anymore, caused the legal blindness.
Mm. Yeah.
And so my research is looking at things that used to be and finding ways to reverse them. And in many ways, it's like also me trying to understand how Jesus created miracles. I'm not
Yeah.
Christian, but I really want to understand the power of his words and the power of his actions. And I'm seeing that unfold here. If we
Yeah.
lift the trauma out of the body,
Hmm.
how we lift these diagnosed, the diagnosed framework from that individual too.
Yeah, I love how you put Jesus in there because during a few of his miracles, the caveat was you have to believe,
Yeah,
right? You have to have faith. If you don't have faith, then no, you're not going to see. No, that mud is not going to produce what you need to produce, right? So yeah, I love that because it a lot of the times, especially if we were to get into religion or what have you, people are waiting for the manna to come down. They're waiting for the miracles to come down. And it's like, yeah, but you have a part to play in this as well,
yeah,
right? We just have to open up your mind to know that you can and that you have the availability to do it, you have the capacity to do it, and that it works, right? And then we'll let, not then, but then we will allow and collaborate with spirit and with the metaphysics and all the things that the body is capable of and things outside of us is capable of to make us who we're supposed to be, to heal us, to do all the things, right? So there's so many facets to this. I love this, Annie. um One question I want to ask you before we tie up: if you were to think about, just in a flash, your whole life and where you are right now, who would you say that you are? Who are you, Annie?
it comes back to being a metaphysical trauma researcher. I
Okay.
want I want that sixth layer of belief systems to be acknowledged as the third attribute of how we navigate this world.
Okay.
If our beliefs are skewed, it affects everything. So, as a researcher, I want to be able to bring that information to the people.
Okay.
And along the way, witness a lot of miracles.
Hmm.
I think at the end of my life, I want to look back and see that I changed culture. See
Okay.
that I participated in changing the way people see trauma,
Hmm.
and that we have more compassion for the zoomed up, zoomed out story. Instead of looking at one person in one moment in time behaviorally, we say, okay, let's look at the big story.
Yeah.
And how did all of these layers contribute to this person coming to this moment?
Yeah.
And can we have a little bit more compassion and dignity for humanity?
Yeah. Definitely. I love that.
But that
I
comes
love
with a lot of
that.
boundaries too. It also says, oppressor, this behavior is not welcome here either.
Hmm.
We're going to have compassion. We're going to have expectations for the individual to learn and have awareness, but we're also going to have expectations for the oppressors to step back and not continue the behavior either. We have to have, again, accountability and responsibility as a community, as a society.
Yeah. Definitely. Um, okay. So, Annie, what can we look forward to seeing from you here in the near future?
My book.
Yay.
Book. Yeah, it'll be out. Soft launch will be early June, and
Okay.
the hard launch is August 12th.
Okay.
So it'll be available quietly for pre-order, and then for purchase June and July, and then heavily to the public August 12th. So anyone following my
Mhm.
newsletter, anyone following me on social media will be the announcements will be there.
Okay, awesome. And everything that's needed to get in touch with Annie and to follow her newsletter and to get her book and just to find out more about her will be under her bio, under her, it will be in her bio under the podcast. Okay. Annie, thank you so much for coming into the Shadow Box and sharing your wealth of knowledge with us and your experience in the military and everything that just kind of came with that and came before it and came after it. I really honor your story and thank you for serving this crazy, crazy world, I will say. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. Everyone else, thank you for coming into the Shadow Box and sharing this moment with us.